I'm Abby.
I'm Allie.
We're the Rannick Twins, and this is Oops, I Arted. Today, we're going to be going over one of my favorite stories in music history, Jim Morrison's arrest for indecent exposure in Miami of 1969.
Ah, yes. I remember reading about this in that biography, No One Gets Out of Here Alive.
So, this event is considered the beginning of the end of the Doors and their popularity, and really just Jim Morrison's career as a whole.
It's kind of like the downfall.
Yes. The Doors were notorious for starting riots, having very crazy and destructive crowds at their concerts, and Jim was notorious for getting people really riled up.
Well, he knew how, and I think he kind of played that to his advantage, for sure.
Absolutely. So, what do you know about this?
The book kind of briefly touches it, and I don't think that he exposed himself, but he definitely made it seem that way.
Okay, so we're kind of on the same page here. Basically, we're going to start from the beginning. So It was 3 years before Jim Morrison died, actually. He died in 1971, and this was in the Dinner Key Auditorium in Coconut Grove on March 1st of 1969. The Dinner Key Auditorium is a converted airplane hangar that could usually seat around 7,000 people, but the manager of the Doors had this bright idea. He said, why don't we take out all the seats and sell as many tickets as we can? So 14,000 people ended up in the Dinner Key Auditorium that night. People were literally crawling, like, on the rafters.
Wow.
And stuff like that.
So double the usual
crowd.
Yes.
Yes. And this is Miami, Florida in March. Okay? It's hot and humid and packed in this airplane hangar. Everybody was drunk, too, and on whatever else you can get in 69. So Jim, naturally, got off the plane in Miami and began also partaking in the alcohol. So he was pretty drunk by the time he hit the stage.
Of course he was. You gotta be ready, right?
Absolutely. So he opened up the stage, and he was like, Adolf Hitler is alive and well and lives in Miami, Florida. That was one of the first things that he said. He also did not remember the words to Break On Through, one of their most famous songs. So it was definitely a strong start for Jim.
That's just when you let the crowd sing it, you know?
And after that, it only got worse. So Jim started ranting, much like he does in some of the other concerts that you can watch on YouTube, but he started going off about people needing to love each other and love your neighbor and your friends and to...
This sounds very hippy-dippy.
It was. You can watch most of the concert or listen to most of it online, but the problem is that it was released on a CD, so a lot of the juicy bits are cut out. He was ranting about living in Tallahassee, because he's from Florida, and he said he got smart and moved to Los Angeles, and he invited everybody with him to put their toes in the sand, like you can't do that in Florida. So, that was probably the most lucid statement he made the entire night. After that, it only got hotter, and everybody only proceeded to get more inebriated, and Jim started using profane language, calling people idiots and slaves to the system, and telling them that they were sheep, and this isn't something you tell a crowd of 14,000 people from Florida.
Yeah.
This was still when Miami was considered the Deep South in the Bible Belt. You know, Miami in 69 is a lot different than Miami in 2019.
Yes, definitely.
So they were still pretty uptight about profanity.
Sensitive.
Yes, and things like that.
I'm sure they hated the end.
Well, you know, we need to do a whole show on that song, because that's an interesting statement that you made there. So, Morrison then started inviting people to start stripping and taking their clothes off with him. And with him? Yes! So, he wanted everybody to get
naked,
basically. And so, I looked for a long time to see why he even would say anything like this. And I saw a couple interviews stating that he went to a show by the Living Theater, and that's a liberal arts group. They experimented with breaking the fourth wall and undressing themselves and interacting with the crowd. I think that he brought this West Coast progressive liberal arts movement to Miami, Florida, in the Deep South.
He thought it would work there.
Yes, and Ray Manzarek is quoted as saying, "He's going to show these Florida people what psychedelic West Coast shamanism and confrontation is all about." Which is one of my favorite quotes I think I've ever read. So, Ray was on stage with Jim, and there's a great NPR interview in 2010 after Jim was pardoned that Ray does on this night.
So Jim was pardoned for?
Yes, we're getting there.
Okay.
We're getting there. So, Jim started inviting people to strip and asked the crowd if they wanted to see his rooster.
He used a different word, didn't he?
Yes. So, Jim is stated in expressing that he felt a little bit of a sex symbol, as I'm sure a lot of rock star male figures felt in the 60s and 70s. You know, they were kind of idolized for being these amazing, beautiful, sensual people or whatever. And Jim really definitely didn't do anything to help his case.
There were plenty of pictures.
Pants are tight.
The shirts are loose.
Yes, or not there, and the hair is long and beautiful. You guys know what we're talking about. So
different time.
It kind of was getting to his head a little bit, because Jim was really about the doors of perception, you know, and about expanding your mind and stuff like that, not about being a sex symbol to a bunch of young girls. He didn't seem to mind that, though, either. But he said something along the lines of, "You didn't come to hear a rock and roll band play some songs. You came to see something, didn't you? What'd you come to see? You came to see something you've never seen before." And that's when he says, "Okay, how about I show you my rooster." So the crowd is just losing their minds at this point.
Is it a positive losing their minds or a negative losing their minds?
See, that's the thing, because if I was in that crowd of 14,000 people, I'd probably just be screaming. And, like, you can't really tell if that's good or bad, right? You just have a crowd of 14,000 young people screaming at you. And I'm sure Jim's perception is also a little altered, seeing as though he's under the influence.
Yes.
So, this is going to come from Ray Manzarek's account. I felt like that was the most reasonable source. Ray Manzarek.
He was there.
Yeah, he was on stage. So Ray says that he takes his shirt off and turns around, starts fiddling with his zipper, and he has his t-shirt held in front of him at his pants level. And he turns around, almost like a magic trick, right? And he says, "Did you see it?" And he does it again. He said, "Did you see it? I showed it to you. I showed it to you. Did you see it?"
So he's like moving his shirt in front of and out of the way of his
very
pants.
quickly.
Yes.
You know, and he's like, "You saw it and you loved it. It's what you wanted to see." And the crowd lost their minds. So Ray is terrified.
I would be too.
And Ray claims that the entire crowd hallucinated it, like a mass hallucination. And he even compares it to a religious hallucination.
Maybe like a hysteria.
I almost want to think of it as a telephone situation. The people up front were like,
"Oh, we totally
crap."
saw it.
And then it got to the back and they were like, "Whoa, everybody saw it," you know? And groupthink, I think, was playing a role here.
Group mentality.
Ray also says he thinks it could be likely that the crowd was seeing something they wanted to see.
I mean, naturally.
So the police waited to make a statement on it for a while because they were trying to collect video and photographic evidence, which there was very little of from that night. There was a lot of audio recording, though.
Yeah, because they were putting it on the album.
And this is where the whole eyewitness account thing gets to me, because you and I listen to a lot of true crime, and we know that eyewitness counts are not credible, really, by any means.
Yeah, they're not,
especially not
completely credible.
Young, inebriated adults and teenagers.
I wonder if that was taken into account.
So, after that, Jim decides that he's going to invite the entire crowd onto the stage to be up there with him.
Ah, yes.
And collapses
all 14,000 of you.
So this tiny, from eyewitness accounts of people that have said that the stage was already pretty rickety. And so these people rush the stage and it just completely destroys the stage. So at this point, people are going crazy.
I'm sure Ray Manzarek's like holding his
my organ.
Oh yeah, his organ rather.
So this created a lot of stink in Miami. There was a rally for decency at the Orange Bowl in Florida that high schoolers made, publicity that spread across the country, not as quickly as it would have in today's time, but really tainted who the Doors were and their name. Jim was practically convicted before the trial even began due to bad press, because this was before the media was not allowed to be all over everything all the time.
Well, this was before the media had to be true to what happened all the time.
Yes. So,
well, and even now, that is questionable.
So Jim is quoted as saying, "F this, I'm going to France." And in France he goes. So he goes to Paris, and
he literally fled the country.
Yes, he fled the country shortly after the trial began, and that was where he passed away.
That's where he's buried.
Yes. So all of this happened. It ruined Jim's whole image that I'm sure he worked so hard to build up. And he died in what some would say mysterious circumstances, but that's another story.
Isn't he part of the 27 Club?
Yes, he was 27 years old.
We need to do an episode on that.
Absolutely. In an interview in September 1970, before Jim passed away, he claims that they were exploring the issue of artistic freedom of expression. I love this interview. It kind of breaks my heart a little bit because Jim is very calm about it. He was talking about how I think today's society might have been more accepting of it, but I think that Jim was trying to say that he's trying to push the boundaries of artistic expression and freedom from the West Coast to the East Coast. I think he was trying to bring that progressive ideal there.
It was too soon.
Yes, I think that he may have been a little ahead of his time. Or maybe it was just the alcohol and hallucinogens, you know? Maybe he was crazy. We'll never truly know what happened. Jim passed away and was pardoned 40 years after his death in 2010. Pardoned means that he was guilty for it, which was very upsetting to his wife, but the rest of the band was relieved. So,
surely. All right, well, next week we're going to be covering Michelangelo's David and Goliath.
Yes, this is a very fun art history story.
I am excited to talk about Michelangelo as a person and just his beautiful sculpture that is well known across the world.
We'll catch you guys next week.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in for another journey of Oops, I Arted.